The brass casing hit the concrete floor with a distinctive ping as Maya Chen squeezed the trigger for the 100th time that morning. Through the haze of gunpowder smoke, she could see the perfect cluster of holes forming in the center of the target 25 yards downrange. Each shot landed within a quarter-inch of the others, creating a pattern so tight it looked like someone had punched a single hole through the paper. Behind her, she could hear the whispered conversations of the other shooters at precision point, their voices carrying a mixture of disbelief and irritation that had become all too familiar over the past 3 months. Maya lowered her Glock 19 and pressed the button to bring the target forward. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. As the paper glided toward her on the motorized cable system, she could see Frank Morrison's reflection in the glass partition, separating the shooting lanes from the observation area. The range owner stood with his arms crossed, his weathered face set in the same disapproving scowl he'd worn every time Maya had stepped foot in his establishment. Next to him, his nephew Jake Stevens shook his head slowly, while Mike Thompson, the local shooting champion whose records dominated the trophy wall, muttered something under his breath that made the other men chuckle. The target reached Maya's station, revealing what she already knew. 10 shots, 10 perfect hits in the X-ring. It wasn't luck, and it wasn't beginner's fortune. It was the result of an analytical mind applied to the mechanics of marksmanship, combined with steady hands that spent 8 hours a day rebuilding carburetors and adjusting engine timing at Tony's Auto Repair. Maya had approached shooting the same way she approached everything else in her life, by understanding the physics, identifying the variables, and eliminating human error through systematic practice. She clipped the target to her range bag and began cleaning her weapon with the methodical precision that had started this whole mess in the first place. 3 months ago, she'd walked into Precision Point as a complete novice, interested in learning something new and maybe finding a hobby that didn't involve getting grease under her fingernails. What she'd found instead was a community frozen in time, run by men who seemed more interested in preserving tradition than pursuing excellence. Maya's first day at Precision Point should have been straightforward. She'd paid for the basic safety course, listened politely as Jake Stevens recited the standard 4 rules of firearm safety, and nodded in all the right places when Frank Morrison explained how the range had been operating successfully since 1987 using the same tried-and-true methods. But Maya had always been the type of person who asked questions, and by the end of that first session, she'd managed to point out 3 ways the range's safety protocols could be improved, suggest a more efficient method for teaching proper grip technique, and diplomatically mention that the lighting on lanes 7 through 10 was insufficient for accurate shooting. Frank Morrison had not appreciated the feedback. In his 37 years of firearms instruction, first as a police academy trainer, and then as the owner of Cedar Hill's premier shooting facility, he'd developed a particular way of doing things. Students learned the fundamentals exactly as he taught them, progressed through his carefully structured curriculum, and eventually became competent shooters who respected both the craft and the institution. What Frank Morrison did not tolerate was 28-year-old auto mechanics with engineering degrees questioning methods that had produced 3 generations of skilled marksmen. The tension had started small. Maya would finish the basic exercises faster than other students, then spend her remaining range time experimenting with different stances and grip modifications. When Jake Stevens corrected her form, she'd politely explain why her variation actually provided better stability and recoil control. When Frank Morrison demonstrated the proper sight picture, Maya would nod respectfully, then ask why they weren't using the more modern sight alignment techniques that competitive shooters had adopted. Each question, each suggestion, each small deviation from the established curriculum felt like a challenge to everything Frank Morrison had built. By her 6th visit, Maya had quietly become the best shooter at precision point. Her groups were consistently tighter than those of members who'd been shooting for years. Her speed was improving rapidly, and her understanding of ballistics and environmental factors impressed even Sandra Walsh, the range's only other regular female shooter. Sandra had been coming to precision point for 8 years, had earned the grudging respect of the male-dominated community, and recognized in Maya something she'd never seen before: natural talent combined with an engineer's analytical mind and the confidence to trust her own observations over received wisdom. The breaking point came on a busy Saturday morning in late September. Maya had arrived early, as had become her habit, to avoid the weekend crowds and get some focused practice time. She'd been working on her 100-yard accuracy using a modified Weaver stance that provided better bone support than the traditional isosceles position Frank Morrison insisted all students learn. Her groups were running consistently under 2 inches, well within the accuracy standards for expert marksmanship, when she noticed another shooter struggling at the adjacent lane. Tommy Rodriguez was 19 years old, worked part-time at the range cleaning targets and restocking ammunition, and had been trying to improve his shooting for the better part of a year. Frank Morrison had been coaching him personally, partly because Tommy was a hard worker and partly because Frank enjoyed having someone who hung on his every word and never questioned his methods. But after 12 months of instruction, Tommy's groups were still running 4 to 5 inches at 25 yards, and his confidence was clearly shaken. Maya watched for several minutes as Tommy fought with a flinch that was throwing his shots low and to the left. Frank Morrison stood behind him, offering the same corrections he'd been giving for months, telling Tommy to squeeze the trigger straight back and follow through. But Maya could see the real problem wasn't Tommy's trigger technique. His grip was too tight, creating tension that transmitted through his arms and caused him to jerk the gun downward at the moment of firing. It was a classic symptom of trying too hard to control recoil instead of managing it properly. During a ceasefire break, Maya approached Tommy quietly. She'd seen the same problem in apprentice mechanics who gripped tools too tightly, creating fatigue and reducing precision. The solution was counterintuitive but effective. Instead of fighting the recoil, you learn to work with it, maintaining control through proper positioning rather than muscular tension. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya demonstrated the proper grip pressure, showed Tommy how to position his support hand to absorb recoil energy, and explained the biomechanics of why a relaxed grip actually provided better control than a death grip. Tommy's next 5-shot group measured less than 2 inches. His face lit up with the kind of excitement that comes from finally understanding something that had been frustrating you for months. He thanked Maya enthusiastically, then made the mistake of explaining his breakthrough to Frank Morrison when the range owner asked about his sudden improvement. Frank Morrison's reaction was swift and decisive. He approached Maya's lane with the purposeful stride of a man who'd reached the end of his patience. His voice was calm, but carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Without question, he informed Maya that her coaching of other shooters was inappropriate, that she was undermining the range's instruction program, and that her unconventional techniques were confusing students who needed to learn fundamentals before attempting advanced methods. Maya's response was equally calm, but decidedly less diplomatic. She pointed out that Tommy's improvement spoke for itself, that the techniques she'd shared were based on established principles of biomechanics and physics, and that perhaps the range might benefit from incorporating more modern training methods. She suggested that Frank Morrison might want to research the coaching techniques used by competitive shooting sports, where precision and efficiency were constantly being refined through scientific analysis. The conversation escalated quickly. Frank Morrison reminded Maya that he'd been teaching firearms for longer than she'd been alive, that Precision Point had an established reputation for producing safe and competent shooters, and that he didn't. Need advice from someone who'd been shooting for less than 3 months. Maya responded that longevity didn't necessarily equal effectiveness, that she'd observed several outdated practices that could be improved, and that dismissing new ideas, simply because they came from a newer shooter, seemed counterproductive. Other range members had stopped shooting to listen. Sandra Walsh watched with obvious interest, having harbored similar thoughts about the range's resistance to change. Mike Thompson shook his head disapprovingly, muttering about newcomers who didn't understand respect for tradition. Jake Stevens stood loyally behind his uncle, though his expression suggested he might have been privately impressed by Maya's shooting performance. Frank Morrison ended the discussion by informing Maya that Precision Point was a private business with established standards and methods. If she wasn't satisfied with their approach, she was welcome to find another facility that better suited her preferences. The implication was clear: conform to their way of doing things or leave. Maya gathered her equipment, packed her range bag with deliberate precision, and walked out of Precision Point for what Frank Morrison assumed would be the last time. But Maya Chen had never been the type of person to back down from a challenge, especially when she knew she was right. As she drove home through the streets of Cedar Hills, past the familiar landmarks of her small hometown, she found herself thinking not about Frank Morrison's stubborn traditionalism, but about the record board that dominated the wall behind the front counter at Precision Point. Those records represented the best performances in the range's 37-year history. 25-yard precision, 100-yard accuracy, speed shooting, moving targets, and overall competition scores. Most had stood for years, some for over a decade. Monuments to the skills of shooters who'd mastered their craft within Frank Morrison's system. Maya had studied those records during her time at the range, analyzing them with the same methodical approach she brought to everything else. She'd noted which techniques the record holders used, what equipment they preferred, and most importantly, where their performances could theoretically be improved. The engineer in her saw inefficiencies in their methods, opportunities for optimization that traditional approaches might not recognize. The competitor in her saw challenges that could be met with the right combination of skill, preparation, and determination. By the time she reached her apartment above Sarah's coffee shop on Cedar Hills Main Street, Maya had made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to find another shooting range. She wasn't going to quietly accept Frank Morrison's dismissal or pretend that his outdated methods were the only way to learn marksmanship. Instead, she was going to do something that would force everyone at Precision Point to acknowledge what she'd been trying to tell them all along. Maya Chen was going to break every single record on that wall. And when she did, Frank Morrison would have no choice but to admit that maybe, just maybe, there was more than one way to achieve excellence with a firearm. The question wasn't whether she had the skill to do it. After 3 months of systematic practice and analysis, Maya was confident in her abilities. The question was whether she could find a way to get back into Precision Point long enough to prove her point. The answer to that question would come sooner than she expected, and from a source she never could have anticipated. Because while Frank Morrison thought he'd solved his Maya Chen problem by banning her from his range, he'd actually created a much bigger problem for himself. Word travels fast in a small town like Cedar Hills, and the story of the young woman who'd been kicked out for being too good at shooting was about to reach some very interested ears. Sandra Walsh had been thinking about that confrontation all weekend. As the only other woman who shot regularly at Precision Point, she'd watched Maya's progress with a mixture of admiration and recognition. She'd seen the same dismissive attitudes, the same resistance to change, the same assumption that experience automatically trumped innovation. But she'd also seen something else in Maya's shooting that impressed her more than pure accuracy. Maya approached marksmanship with a scientific mindset that reminded Sandra of her own background in laboratory research before she'd retired to Cedar Hills. On Monday morning, Sandra made a phone call that would set everything in motion. She contacted Rebecca Chen, Maya's younger sister who worked as a physical therapist at Cedar Hills Medical Center. Sandra had met Rebecca at a community fundraiser and remembered her mentioning her sister's new interest in shooting sports. What Sandra proposed was simple but potentially game-changing. If Maya was serious about proving her point, Sandra could help arrange something that would give her the opportunity to do exactly that. The annual Cedar Hills Community Shooting Competition was scheduled for the first weekend in November, just 6 weeks away. The event was sponsored by local businesses, drew participants from throughout Riverside County, and most importantly, was held at Precision Point Shooting Range. Winners in each category would have their names added to the permanent record board, and the overall champion would receive a trophy that had been awarded annually since 1995. Frank Morrison served as the head judge, and participation required his approval. Sandra's plan was elegant in its simplicity. She would sponsor Maya as her guest competitor, taking responsibility for her entry and vouching for her safety qualifications. The competition rules stated that any sponsor member in good standing could bring one guest, and Sandra's 8-year membership certainly qualified her. Frank Morrison could refuse the entry, but doing so would require him to explain why he was blocking a qualified shooter from participating in a community event, especially when that shooter's only offense had been demonstrating superior marksmanship skills. When Rebecca relayed Sandra's offer to Maya that evening, she found her sister in her apartment's small living room, surrounded by shooting manuals, ballistics charts, and notebook pages covered with calculations. Maya had spent the weekend researching everything she could find about competitive shooting techniques, analyzing the theoretical limits of accuracy for various firearms and ammunition combinations, and developing a training program that would prepare her for the kind of performance she'd need to break multiple range records. Maya accepted Sandra's offer immediately, but she also made it clear that she wasn't interested in simply participating in the competition. If she was going back to Precision Point, it would be to make a statement that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. She intended to compete in every category, break every record she could reach, and demonstrate once and for all that Frank Morrison's rigid adherence to traditional methods was holding back the entire shooting community at Precision Point. The next 6 weeks would test everything Maya had learned about marksmanship, everything she understood about preparation and mental toughness, and everything she believed about the importance of standing up for your convictions. She would need to find a place to train, equipment that could deliver the precision she required, and the mental strength to perform under the intense scrutiny of people who wanted to see her fail. But Maya Chen had rebuilt engines that other mechanics declared unfixable, earned her engineering degree while working full-time to support herself and Rebecca, and never once backed down from a challenge that mattered to her. Breaking a few shooting records seemed almost simple by comparison. The hard part would be doing it in front of Frank Morrison, and proving that sometimes the student really could surpass the teacher, especially when the teacher refused to keep learning. Finding a place to train turned out to be more complicated than Maya had anticipated. Precision Point wasn't the only shooting range in Riverside County, but it was the only one within reasonable driving distance of Cedar Hills that offered the specific facilities she needed. The nearest alternative was Valley Vista Outdoor Range, 30 miles east on Highway 74, a sprawling facility that catered primarily to hunters and long-range shooting enthusiasts. Maya made the drive on a Tuesday morning, her Civic loaded with the equipment she'd accumulated during her brief time at Precision Point. Valley Vista was everything Precision Point wasn't. Where Frank Morrison's range was compact and traditional, Valley Vista sprawled across several hundred acres of desert terrain, with shooting positions that extended out to 1,000 yards. The clientele was different too, mostly serious competitive shooters and hunters who traveled significant distances to access the facility's advanced features. The atmosphere was more relaxed, less concerned with rigid protocols, and more focused on practical results. Maya met with the range manager, a soft-spoken former Marine named David Kim, who listened carefully as she explained her situation. She didn't mention the confrontation with Frank Morrison directly, simply stating that she needed a place to train for an upcoming competition and required access to precision shooting lanes at various distances. David was more interested in her shooting capabilities than her history with other ranges, and after watching her put 10 rounds into a 2-inch group at 100 yards, he offered her a monthly membership that included unlimited range time and access to their advanced training facilities. The difference in training environment was immediately apparent. Valley Vista's lanes were equipped with digital scoring systems that provided instant feedback on group size and point of impact. The lighting was professionally designed for optimal visibility, and the target retrieval systems operated smoothly and quietly. Most importantly, the other shooters at Valley Vista approached their craft with a seriousness that reminded Maya of the precision machining environment at Tony's Auto Repair. These were people who understood that excellence required constant attention to detail and systematic improvement. Maya established a training routine that reflected her engineering background and competitive nature. She arrived at Valley Vista 3 mornings a week before work, spending 2 hours working on specific skills before driving back to Cedar Hills to open Tony's shop. Her practice sessions were methodical and data-driven, with each shot recorded and analyzed for patterns that might indicate areas for improvement. She maintained detailed logs of environmental conditions, ammunition performance, and equipment modifications, treating her shooting development like a research project with measurable objectives. The first skill Maya focused on was precision shooting at 25 yards, the distance where Mike Thompson's record of 98 out of 100 points had stood since 2019. Thompson's achievement represented nearly perfect shooting under ideal conditions, the kind of performance that required absolute consistency in grip, stance, sight alignment, and trigger control. Maya analyzed video footage of Thompson's technique, studying his shooting style frame by frame to understand how he achieved such remarkable accuracy. What Maya discovered was that Thompson was indeed an exceptional shooter, but his technique relied heavily on muscle memory developed over years of practice using the same methods Frank Morrison had taught him. Thompson's stance was textbook perfect, according to traditional instruction, his grip consistent and his trigger control smooth. But Maya's engineering mind identified several areas where modern competitive techniques could theoretically produce even better results. The key insight came from studying the biomechanics of how Thompson's body absorbed and managed recoil. Traditional shooting instruction emphasized controlling recoil through firm grip and solid stance, essentially fighting against the physics of firing a handgun. Modern competitive shooting had evolved toward a different approach, using proper positioning and grip techniques to work with recoil rather than against it, allowing for faster recovery and more consistent follow-up shots. Maya spent weeks experimenting with grip modifications, testing different levels of pressure and hand positioning to find the combination that provided maximum control with minimum tension. She discovered that a slight forward cant to her shooting hand, combined with more aggressive thumb placement, gave her better leverage over the gun's natural recoil pattern. The modification felt awkward at first, requiring her to rebuild muscle memory she'd developed over the past several months. But the results were undeniable. Her groups tightened consistently, and her shooting became more repeatable under different environmental conditions. The 100-yard accuracy challenge required a completely different approach. Frank Morrison's record of 195 out of 200 points had been set 15 years earlier, back when he was still actively competing in regional matches. At 100 yards, environmental factors became critical variables that could make the difference between perfect accuracy and frustrating misses. Wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, even barometric pressure could affect bullet trajectory enough to throw shots outside the scoring rings. Maya attacked the 100-yard challenge like an engineering problem, breaking it down into component variables that could be measured and compensated for. She invested in a portable weather station that provided real-time data on wind speed, direction, temperature, and humidity. She researched ballistic software that could calculate bullet drop and drift based on specific ammunition characteristics and environmental conditions. Most importantly, she developed a systematic approach to reading environmental conditions and making appropriate adjustments to her point of aim. The process was time-consuming and occasionally frustrating. Maya discovered that theoretical calculations only took you so far in practical shooting situations. Real-world accuracy required developing an intuitive feel for how different conditions affected bullet flight, the kind of understanding that came only through extensive practice under varying circumstances. She learned to read wind direction from the movement of grass and dust, to recognize how temperature changes affected her ammunition's velocity, and to make rapid mental calculations that translated environmental data into sight adjustments. Maya's most significant breakthrough came when she realized that Frank Morrison's 15-year-old record had been set using ammunition and equipment that were now considered outdated. Modern match-grade ammunition offered superior consistency and accuracy compared to what had been available in 2009. Advances in bullet design, powder technology, and quality control meant that today's precision ammunition could deliver tighter groups and more predictable performance than anything Morrison had access to during his competitive years. The ethical question of whether using superior equipment constituted an unfair advantage occupied Maya's thoughts for several days. She ultimately decided that innovation and technological advancement were natural parts of competitive shooting, just as they were in any other field that demanded precision and performance. Frank Morrison could have upgraded his equipment and techniques at any time over the past 15 years. The fact that he'd chosen to stick with traditional methods and older technology was his decision, not her limitation. Speed shooting presented an entirely different set of challenges. Jake Stevens' record of 8 bullseyes in 45 seconds required a combination of accuracy and rapid target acquisition that pushed the limits of human reaction time and motor control. This was less about precision engineering and more about developing the kind of muscle memory and hand-eye coordination that allowed competitive shooters to engage multiple targets with minimal time between shots. Maya approached speed shooting training with the same systematic methodology she applied to precision work, but the focus shifted from analytical thinking to reactive performance. She set up training drills that emphasized smooth, efficient movement between targets, working to eliminate any wasted motion or hesitation in her shooting sequence. The key was developing a rhythm that allowed her to fire accurately without taking time to consciously aim at each target. The breakthrough in speed shooting came when Maya realized that the skill was similar to the rapid diagnostic work she performed at Tony's Auto Repair. When an engine misfired or made an unusual noise, experienced mechanics didn't need to consciously analyze every possible cause. Years of practice had developed pattern recognition that allowed them to identify problems almost instantly and move directly to the appropriate solution. Speed shooting required the same kind of intuitive response, where sight picture and trigger control became automatic rather than deliberate. Maya's training routine expanded to include dry fire practice at home, using an unloaded pistol to work on trigger control and target transitions without the expense and time constraints of live fire practice. She set up targets in her apartment and practiced drawing from a holster, acquiring sight picture, and following through on trigger pulls hundreds of times each evening. The repetition was monotonous but essential, building the kind of unconscious competence that would allow her to perform under the pressure of competition. Moving target shooting represented perhaps the most complex challenge Maya would face. Sandra Walsh's record of 15 hits out of 20 on moving targets required skills that combine precision, shooting with the ability to calculate lead angles and timing for targets that moved at different speeds and directions. This was ballistics in motion, requiring Maya to understand not just where a target was, but where it would be when her bullet arrived. Maya discovered that moving target shooting was as much about prediction as it was about marksmanship. The targets at precision point moved in predictable patterns, but successful shooting required calculating the intersection of bullet trajectory and target position with split-second timing. Too much lead and the bullet passed in front of the target, too little and it passed behind. The margin for error was measured in inches over distances where perfect timing was everything. The mathematical aspect of moving target shooting appealed to Maya's engineering background. She could calculate theoretical lead angles based on target speed, bullet velocity, and distance, but translating those calculations into practical shooting. Skills required developing an intuitive sense of timing and movement. Maya spent hours at Valley Vista working with their moving target systems, learning to track targets smoothly and fire at the precise moment when her calculations intersected with her instincts. Perhaps the most valuable lesson Maya learned during her training at Valley Vista came from observing other competitive shooters who used the facility. These weren't weekend hobbyists or casual enthusiasts, but serious competitors who approached marksmanship as both sport and science. They shared techniques freely, offered suggestions for improvement, and created an environment where innovation was encouraged rather than discouraged. One shooter in particular, a woman named Jessica Martinez who competed in regional pistol competitions, became an informal mentor for Maya. Jessica had faced similar challenges when she started competing, dealing with traditional shooting communities that were slow to accept new techniques or ideas from women. She recognized Maya's analytical approach and natural talent, offering guidance on competition strategy and mental preparation that went beyond simple marksmanship skills. Jessica's most important advice concerned the psychological aspects of competitive shooting. Technical skill was essential, but competition pressure could destroy even the most accomplished shooter's performance if they weren't mentally prepared. She taught Maya visualization techniques that allowed her to rehearse perfect performances mentally, building confidence and familiarity with the competitive environment before actually facing it. The mental preparation became increasingly important. As the competition day approached, Maya knew that breaking multiple records at precision point would require more than just superior shooting skills. She would be performing in front of people who wanted to see her fail, under conditions designed to test not just her marksmanship, but her composure under pressure. Frank Morrison would be watching every shot, looking for any sign of weakness or failure that would justify his decision to ban her from the range. Maya's training intensified during the final weeks before the competition. She increased her practice frequency to 5 days a week, working on all aspects of shooting that would be tested during the event. Her performance data showed consistent improvement across all categories, with group sizes and scores that suggested she had a realistic chance of breaking several records. But data was one thing, and performance under competitive pressure was another entirely. The equipment preparation was as crucial as the skill development. Maya had invested in match-grade ammunition for each category of competition, testing different loads to find the combinations that delivered the best accuracy in her specific firearms. She had modified her pistol's trigger to provide a cleaner, more consistent pull, and had installed precision sights that offered better target resolution than the factory equipment. Every component of her shooting system had been optimized for the performance she would need to achieve her goals. 3 weeks before the competition, Maya received unexpected validation for her training approach. Valley Vista hosted a regional precision shooting match that drew competitors from throughout Southern California. Maya entered the event partly for additional practice and partly to test her skills against experienced competitive shooters. Her performance exceeded even her own expectations, finishing second overall in a field of 36 shooters, many of whom had been competing for years. The experience at the regional match provided Maya with confidence that her systematic approach to skill development was producing real results. More importantly, it gave her experience performing under genuine competitive pressure, dealing with the mental challenges that came with shooting in front of judges and spectators who were evaluating every aspect of her performance. As October progressed toward November, Maya found herself thinking less about the technical aspects of shooting and more about the broader implications of what she was attempting. This wasn't just about breaking records or proving Frank Morrison wrong, though both of those objectives remained important to her. Maya had come to understand that her challenge to Precision Point's traditional methods represented something larger, a question about whether established institutions could adapt and improve or would continue to resist change simply because it threatened their authority. The thought that occupied Maya most during her final weeks of preparation was what would happen after the competition. If she succeeded in breaking multiple records, Frank Morrison would be forced to acknowledge that her techniques were effective, but that didn't necessarily mean he would change his approach to instruction or his attitudes toward innovation. Maya realized that proving her point might be less satisfying than she had anticipated if it didn't actually lead to positive changes at Precision Point, but those concerns were secondary to the immediate challenge she faced. Maya had committed herself to this path, and she intended to see it through regardless of the long-term consequences. In 6 weeks of intensive training, she had developed shooting skills that surpassed anything she had achieved during her time at Precision Point. Her groups were tighter, her consistency was better, and her confidence was higher than it had ever been. The only question remaining was whether she could execute that performance when it mattered most, in front of the very people who had doubted her abilities and dismissed her ideas. Maya Chen was about to find out if months of preparation and systematic improvement could overcome the pressure of competing in an environment where failure would vindicate everyone who had questioned whether she belonged there in the first place. The weekend of the Cedar Hills community shooting competition arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made outdoor events memorable. Maya woke before dawn on Saturday morning, feeling the familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness that preceded any important challenge. She had prepared for this moment as thoroughly as she knew how, but preparation could only take her so far. The rest would depend on her ability to execute under pressure and maintain her composure in an environment that would be anything but supportive. Maya arrived at Precision Point an hour before the competition was scheduled to begin, carrying her equipment in the same range bag she had used during her original time at the facility. The parking lot was already busy with competitors and spectators arriving for the day's events. She recognized several shooters from Valley Vista who had made the drive to participate, their presence providing some comfort in what would otherwise be a completely hostile environment. Frank Morrison stood near the entrance to the range, greeting participants and reviewing the day's schedule with his staff. He watched Maya approach with an expression that conveyed both surprise and irritation, clearly not having expected her to actually follow through on Sandra Walsh's entry. Jake Stevens stood beside his uncle, while Mike Thompson chatted with several other longtime members who had gathered to watch the competition. Sandra Walsh appeared at Maya's side as she approached the registration table, offering moral support and serving as her official sponsor for the event. Sandra's presence lent legitimacy to Maya's participation and made it more difficult for Frank Morrison to create obstacles or question her qualifications. The registration process proceeded smoothly, though Maya could feel the attention of everyone around her as word spread that the woman who had been banned from Precision Point had returned to compete. Tommy Rodriguez approached Maya during the competitor briefing, offering a shy smile and words of encouragement that reminded her why she had gotten involved in this situation in the first place. Tommy's shooting had continued to improve using the techniques Maya had shared with him, though he was careful not to mention that fact within Frank Morrison's hearing. His presence served as a reminder that this competition was about more than personal vindication. It was about proving that innovation and new ideas could benefit everyone in the shooting community. The competition format would test all aspects of marksmanship over the course of 2 days. Saturday would feature precision shooting at 25 and 100 yards, along with speed shooting events. Sunday would include moving target challenges and the overall championship round that combined elements from all categories. Maya would have multiple opportunities to break records, but she would also face the psychological pressure of performing consistently over an extended period while dealing with scrutiny from spectators who questioned her presence at the event. As the competition began, Maya found herself assigned to a shooting position that provided clear visibility to everyone in the observation area. Frank Morrison had arranged the layout to ensure that her performance would be highly visible, perhaps hoping that public failure would be more effective than private criticism in discouraging future challenges to his authority. Maya accepted the positioning without complaint, understanding that exceptional performance under those conditions would be even more convincing than success in a less conspicuous setting. The first event was precision shooting at 25 yards, the category where Mike Thompson's record of 98 out of 100 points had stood for 5 years. Maya approached the firing line with the methodical preparation that had become second nature during her training at Valley Vista. She checked her equipment, verified her ammunition, and established her shooting position with the same attention to detail that characterized all of her work. The first 5 shots felt perfect, each trigger pull smooth and consistent, each sight picture clear and precisely aligned. Maya could see through her spotting scope that her bullets were impacting exactly where she intended, creating a tight group centered in the target's highest scoring ring. The second 5 shots maintained the same level of precision, and by the time she had completed the first half of her string, Maya knew she was shooting at a level that could challenge Thompson's record. The pressure increased as other competitors and spectators began to notice the tight groups Maya was producing. Conversations became quieter, and more attention focused on her shooting position as word spread that something exceptional might be happening. Maya forced herself to maintain her routine and ignore the external distractions, focusing entirely on the mechanics of producing perfect shots. The final 10 shots required absolute concentration and consistency. Maya's groups had been exceptional so far, but competitive shooting demanded sustained excellence rather than occasional brilliance. One bad shot could destroy an otherwise perfect performance, and Maya knew that everyone watching was waiting for her to make exactly that kind of mistake. When Maya's final shot broke, she knew immediately that it found its intended mark. The feeling of a perfect shot was unmistakable, a combination of flawless technique and precise execution that every serious shooter recognized. She lowered her pistol and waited for the targets to be scored, knowing that she had just produced the best 25-yard shooting performance of her life. The official score was announced 5 minutes later, 99 out of 100 points, beating Mike Thompson's 5-year-old record by a single point. The achievement was acknowledged with polite applause from most spectators, though Maya could see the mixture of surprise and resentment on some faces in the crowd. Frank Morrison's expression remained carefully neutral, but Maya could see the calculation in his eyes as he processed the implications of what had just occurred. Mike Thompson approached Maya after the scores were posted, offering congratulations that seemed genuine despite the fact that she had just broken his record. Thompson was a serious competitor who appreciated exceptional shooting regardless of who produced it, and he recognized that Maya's performance represented the kind of marksmanship that elevated the entire sport. His gracious response stood in stark contrast to the sullen silence of some other longtime range members. The 100-yard precision event took place later that afternoon, giving Maya time to process her initial success and prepare for an even more challenging test. Frank Morrison's record of 195 out of 200 points had stood for 15 years, representing the pinnacle of long-range accuracy at precision point. Breaking that record would require not just exceptional shooting, but also perfect environmental reading and ballistic calculation. Maya spent the break between events studying wind conditions and double-checking her ballistic data. The afternoon breeze was variable but manageable, requiring constant attention to changes in speed and direction. Maya's training at Valley Vista had prepared her for exactly these kinds of conditions, teaching her to make rapid adjustments based on environmental feedback rather than relying solely on pre-calculated corrections. The 100-yard shooting position offered a clear view of the entire range, and Maya could see that her performance in the first event had drawn even more attention from spectators and competitors. Sandra Walsh offered encouragement and technical support, helping Maya prepare her equipment and providing an experienced perspective on reading the conditions. Jessica Martinez had made the drive from Valley Vista to watch the competition, offering moral support and tactical advice based on her extensive competitive experience. As Maya settled into her shooting position for the 100-yard event, she felt the weight of expectation from everyone around her. Breaking one record could be attributed to luck or favorable conditions, but breaking a second record would establish a pattern that couldn't be easily dismissed. Frank Morrison's 15-year-old achievement represented not just exceptional shooting, but also the foundation of his authority and credibility as an instructor. Maya's first 5 shots confirmed that her morning performance had not been a fluke. Each bullet impacted within the highest scoring ring, creating a group that measured less than 2 inches despite the challenging distance and environmental conditions. Her technique remained consistent and controlled, drawing on months of systematic practice that had prepared her for exactly this kind of pressure. The middle portion of her shooting string maintained the same level of excellence with each shot, adding to a group that was shaping up to be extraordinary even by competitive standards. Maya could sense the growing attention from spectators as word spread that another record might be in jeopardy. The pressure was intense but manageable, thanks to the mental preparation techniques Jessica Martinez had taught her during training. Maya's final shots required absolute perfection to achieve the score she needed to break Frank Morrison's record. The wind had picked up slightly, adding complexity to her calculations and requiring precise adjustments to her point of aim. Maya trusted her training and experience, making the corrections she believed were necessary and executing each shot with the same methodical precision that had characterized her entire performance. When the final score was announced, the silence that followed was more telling than any applause could have been. Maya had scored 197 out of 200 points, breaking Frank Morrison's 15-year-old record by 2 points and establishing a new standard for long-range accuracy at precision point. The achievement represented not just exceptional shooting, but also validation of the training methods and analytical approach that Frank Morrison had dismissed as unproven and potentially dangerous. Frank Morrison's reaction to losing his signature record was carefully controlled, but clearly difficult for him to manage. His authority and credibility had been built partly on his reputation as the finest marksman at precision point, and seeing that reputation challenged by someone he had banned from the facility created a complex mixture of professional and personal conflict that he struggled to resolve gracefully. As the first day of competition concluded, Maya had already achieved more than she had dared to hope when this journey began. 2 records broken, both by margins that couldn't be attributed to luck or favorable conditions. But she also knew that the most challenging tests were still ahead, and that Frank Morrison would be looking for any opportunity to diminish her achievements or question the legitimacy of her success. Sunday morning arrived with an overcast sky that threatened rain, adding another layer of complexity to the final day of competition. Maya had spent a restless night in her apartment, her mind cycling through technical details and strategic considerations for the challenges ahead. The speed shooting and moving target events would test different aspects of her marksmanship skills, requiring her to shift from the methodical precision that had served her well on Saturday to the reactive, instinctive shooting that demanded split-second timing and muscle memory. The atmosphere at Precision Point felt different when Maya arrived for the second day. Word of her record-breaking performances had spread throughout Cedar Hills overnight, drawing a larger crowd of spectators who came to witness what many were calling the most significant shooting competition in the range's history. Local business owners, city council members, and curious residents who had never shown interest in marksmanship filled the observation areas, creating an environment that felt more like a public exhibition than a sporting event. Frank Morrison moved through the crowd with forced civility, accepting congratulations on hosting such an exciting competition, while clearly struggling with the reality that his facility's most prestigious records had been broken by someone he had considered unworthy of membership. His interactions with Maya remained professionally correct but coldly formal, as if acknowledging her presence only because the competition rules required it. Jake Stevens had spent the evening analyzing Maya's shooting technique, trying to understand how she had achieved performances that exceeded anything he had witnessed in his years at Precision Point. His conversations with other range members revealed a growing division within the shooting community, between those who appreciated excellence regardless of its source, and those who felt threatened by the challenge to established authority and traditional methods. The speed shooting event was scheduled first, with Jake Stevens' record of 8 bullseyes in 45 seconds, representing a standard that had seemed unattainable when Maya first began shooting 3 months earlier. The challenge required hitting 8 separate targets in sequence, with scoring based on both accuracy and time. Competitors were eliminated if they failed to achieve bullseye accuracy on all 8 targets, making the event as much about consistency under pressure as raw speed. Maya's preparation for speed shooting had emphasized smooth, efficient movement and the development of muscle memory that would allow her to transition between targets without conscious thought. Her training at Valley Vista had included hundreds of repetitions of the exact sequence she would face in competition, building the kind of automatic response that could function even under extreme pressure. The first competitor to attempt the speed shooting challenge was Mike Thompson, whose precision shooting record Maya had broken the previous day. Thompson approached the firing line with the confidence of someone who had been competing for over a decade, his movements economical and practiced as he prepared his equipment. His attempt was smooth and controlled, achieving 7 bullseyes in 38 seconds before missing the 8th target, by a margin that eliminated him from contention. 3 more competitors failed to achieve the required accuracy, their shots either missing the bullseye entirely or spreading outside the scoring ring under the pressure of rapid fire. Maya watched each attempt carefully, noting how different shooters handled the transition between targets and the timing they used to balance speed with precision. The pattern that emerged suggested that most competitors were either too deliberate, sacrificing speed for accuracy, or too rushed, allowing their technique to deteriorate under time pressure. When Maya's turn arrived, she approached the firing line with the same methodical preparation she had used for precision shooting, checking her equipment and establishing her position with careful attention to detail. The targets were arranged in a specific pattern that required both lateral and vertical movement, testing her ability to maintain sight alignment while transitioning rapidly between different aiming points. Maya's first shot felt perfect, the sight picture clear, and the trigger break clean as her bullet found the center of the first target. The second and third shots flowed naturally from the first, her body moving smoothly between positions while her hands maintained consistent grip and control of the pistol. The rhythm she had developed during training sessions at Valley Vista emerged automatically, allowing her to fire without conscious thought about technique or timing. The fourth and fifth targets required more dramatic position changes, testing Maya's ability to maintain accuracy while moving more quickly than felt comfortable. Her training had prepared her for exactly this challenge, and her shots continued to find their marks despite the increasing pace. The sixth and seventh targets fell in rapid succession, Maya's confidence building as she realized her preparation was translating into competitive performance. The eighth and final target required a transition that had eliminated several previous competitors, involving both lateral movement and a significant change in elevation. Maya's training had emphasized this exact sequence, and her muscle memory guided her through the movement without hesitation. Her final shot broke cleanly, the bullet impacting the center of the target with authority that left no doubt about the result. The official time was announced 30 seconds later, 8 bullseyes in 39 seconds, breaking Jake Stevens' record by 6 seconds and establishing a new standard that seemed almost impossibly fast to spectators who had watched. Other competitors struggled to achieve the required accuracy in twice the time. The margin of victory was substantial enough to eliminate any question about Maya's superiority in this category of competition. Jake Stevens' reaction to losing his record was more gracious than Maya had expected. He approached her after the scores were posted, offering congratulations that seemed genuine and expressing professional interest in the training methods that had produced such dramatic improvement in her speed shooting capabilities. His response suggested a maturity and sportsmanship that stood in contrast to the bitter resentment visible on some other faces in the crowd. The moving target event presented Maya's greatest challenge, requiring skills that combine precision shooting with the ability to track targets moving at variable speeds and directions. Sandra Walsh's record of 15 hits out of 20 attempts had stood for 3 years, representing a level of performance that required both exceptional marksmanship and an intuitive understanding of timing and lead calculation. Maya had spent considerable time during her training at Valley Vista working with their sophisticated moving target systems, learning to track targets smoothly and fire at precisely the right moment to intersect bullet trajectory with target movement. The skill was part mathematics and part instinct, requiring calculations that had to be performed almost instantly while maintaining the physical control necessary for accurate shooting. The moving target system at Precision Point was older and less sophisticated than the equipment Maya had trained with at Valley Vista, presenting targets that moved in simpler but less predictable patterns. The targets appeared at random intervals and moved at varying speeds, eliminating the possibility of memorizing timing patterns and forcing shooters to react to each presentation as a unique challenge. Sandra Walsh attempted her own record first, demonstrating the smooth tracking technique and precise timing that had established her as Precision Point's most accomplished moving target shooter. Her performance was solid and professional, achieving 12 hits out of 20 attempts with several near misses that highlighted the difficulty of the challenge. Sandra's shooting illustrated both the skill required for moving target engagement and the margin for error that separated good performance from exceptional results. 2 other competitors attempted the moving target challenge before Maya's turn, with results that emphasized how demanding this type of shooting could be. Neither achieved more than 8 hits out of 20 attempts, their struggles highlighting the complexity of tracking moving targets while maintaining the trigger control and sight alignment necessary for accurate shooting. Maya approached the moving target station with equipment she had optimized specifically for this type of shooting. Her pistol had been fitted with sights that provided better target acquisition for moving objects, and she had selected ammunition that offered the most consistent velocity for predictable ballistic performance. Her preparation had included extensive analysis of the mathematical relationships between target speed, distance, and the lead angles required for successful hits. The first target appeared without warning, moving from left to right at moderate speed across Maya's field of view. Her tracking was smooth and controlled, the sight picture moving in sync with the target's motion as she calculated the lead angle required for a successful hit. Her first shot connected solidly, the bullet impacting the target with authority that confirmed her calculations were correct. The second and third targets tested Maya's ability to adapt to different speeds and directions, requiring her to modify her lead calculations almost instantly based on visual assessment of target movement. Her training had prepared her for exactly these kinds of rapid adjustments, and her shots continued to find their marks despite the changing parameters of each engagement. Maya's rhythm developed quickly as she settled into the challenge, her analytical mind working automatically to process the variables affecting each shot while her hands executed the physical requirements of accurate shooting. The combination of mathematical precision and instinctive timing that she had developed during training at Valley Vista emerged under competitive pressure, allowing her to engage targets with confidence and consistency. The middle portion of Maya's attempt maintained the same level of success, with her hits accumulating at a rate that suggested she might achieve something exceptional. Spectators began to gather more closely around the moving target station as word spread that another record might be in jeopardy. The pressure was intense but manageable, thanks to the mental preparation techniques that had become part of Maya's competitive routine. Maya's 15th shot represented a critical moment in her attempt to break Sandra Walsh's record. She needed 5 more hits out of her remaining 5 attempts to achieve a perfect score, something that had never been accomplished in the history of competition. At precision point, the targets for her final 5 attempts seemed to move faster and more unpredictably, testing her ability to maintain accuracy under the pressure of attempting something unprecedented. Her 16th shot connected cleanly, followed by her 17th and 18th with the same precision that had characterized her entire attempt. Maya found herself in the unusual position of being able to achieve a perfect score in the most challenging event of the competition, something that would establish her not just as an exceptional shooter, but as someone who had redefined what was possible at precision point. The 19th target appeared at maximum speed, moving in a pattern that required Maya to track it through the full range of motion, while calculating a lead angle that pushed the limits of her training and experience. Her shot felt perfect when it broke, the timing and technique exactly what her preparation had taught her to execute. The impact was clean and centered, bringing her to within 1 shot of a perfect performance. Maya's final shot carried the weight of everything she had worked toward over the past 6 weeks. A perfect score would not only break Sandra Walsh's record, but would establish an achievement that might stand for years to come. The pressure was enormous, but Maya's training had prepared her for exactly this kind of moment. When the final target appeared, she tracked it smoothly and fired with the same confidence that had carried her through 19 previous successful engagements. The result was announced immediately: 20 hits out of 20 attempts, a perfect score that broke Sandra Walsh's record by 5 hits and achieved something that had never been accomplished in the moving target event at precision point. The achievement represented not just exceptional shooting, but a demonstration of the analytical approach and systematic training methods that Maya had brought to competitive marksmanship. Sandra Walsh was the first to congratulate Maya on breaking her record, offering praise that was both generous and genuinely impressed by the level of performance she had witnessed. Sandra's reaction reflected the attitude of serious competitors who appreciated excellence regardless of who achieved it, and her support provided validation that Maya's success was recognized and respected by those who understood the difficulty of what she had accomplished. Frank Morrison's response to Maya's third record-breaking performance was notably more strained than his reactions to her previous achievements. The perfect score in moving target shooting represented a level of dominance that couldn't be explained away or minimized, and the growing attention from spectators and media representatives who had arrived to cover the competition was making it impossible for him to downplay the significance of what was happening at his facility. The final event of the competition was the overall championship round, which combined elements from all categories of shooting in a format designed to identify the most complete and versatile marksman. The championship had been won 5 times by Mike Thompson, 3 times by Frank Morrison, and twice by other longtime members who had demonstrated exceptional skill across multiple disciplines. Maya entered the championship round having already broken 3 individual records, but the overall title represented something different from category-specific achievements. Winning the championship would establish her as the premier shooter at precision point, a recognition that would be impossible for Frank Morrison or anyone else to dismiss or qualify. The championship format required competitors to demonstrate proficiency in precision shooting, speed shooting, and moving targets within a single extended session that tested both technical skill and mental endurance. Scores from all 3 categories were combined to determine an overall winner, with additional points awarded for consistency across different types of shooting challenges. Maya's preparation for the championship round drew on everything she had learned during her months of training at Valley Vista. Her approach remained analytical and systematic, but she had also developed the kind of intuitive feel for competitive shooting that allowed her to adapt to changing conditions and maintain performance under pressure. The precision portion of the championship round required Maya to duplicate the kind of accuracy that had broken Mike Thompson's and Frank Morrison's records the previous day. Her technique remained consistent and controlled, producing groups that confirmed her ability to shoot at an elite level even after the physical and mental demands of the earlier events. Maya's speed shooting performance in the championship round was even more impressive than her record-breaking achievement. Earlier in the day, the pressure of competing for the overall title seemed to sharpen her focus rather than undermine it, and her time improved by 2 seconds while maintaining perfect accuracy on all required targets. The moving target portion of the championship round tested Maya's ability to maintain the concentration and timing necessary for tracking moving objects. After several hours of intensive competition, her performance remained nearly flawless, achieving 19 hits out of 20 attempts and demonstrating the kind of consistency that separated truly elite shooters from those who could achieve excellence only under ideal conditions. When the final scores were calculated and announced, Maya had won the overall championship by a margin that reflected complete domination rather than a close competitive victory. Her combined score exceeded the previous record by more than 30 points, establishing a new standard that seemed almost impossible for future competitors to match. The trophy presentation took place in front of the largest crowd that ever gathered for a shooting competition at Precision Point. Local news crews had arrived to document what many were calling the most remarkable athletic achievement in Cedar Hill's recent history. Maya accepted the championship trophy with grace and humility, acknowledging the support she had received from Sandra Walsh and expressing respect for the competitors she had defeated. Frank Morrison's presentation of the championship trophy to Maya was painful to witness, his forced congratulations barely concealing the resentment and confusion he felt about being overshadowed at his own facility by someone he had considered unqualified for membership. His brief comments about Maya's achievement were professionally appropriate, but lacked any genuine enthusiasm or recognition of the magnitude of what she had accomplished. The aftermath of Maya's championship victory created a complex dynamic at Precision Point that reflected broader questions about tradition, innovation, and the willingness of established institutions to adapt to new ideas and methods. Maya had proven beyond any reasonable doubt that her analytical approach and systematic training methods could produce results that exceeded anything achieved through traditional instruction, but the question remained whether that proof would lead to meaningful changes in how shooting was taught and practiced at the facility. As the crowd began to disperse and equipment was packed away, Maya found herself surrounded by congratulations from competitors and spectators who had witnessed something extraordinary. But she also noticed the small group of longtime members who gathered around Frank Morrison, their expressions suggesting that Maya's success had created divisions within the shooting community that might prove difficult to resolve. Tommy Rodriguez approached Maya as she prepared to leave, offering thanks for the coaching that had helped him improve his own shooting and expressing hope that her success might lead to changes that would benefit everyone who used the range. His comments reminded Maya that her challenge to Precision Point's traditional methods had been motivated by more than personal vindication. It had been about proving that innovation and new ideas could benefit the entire shooting community. Jessica Martinez, who had made the drive from Valley Vista to watch the championship round, offered perspective that helped Maya understand the broader significance of what she had achieved. Maya's performance had demonstrated that systematic analysis and modern training methods could produce results that exceeded anything possible through traditional approaches, providing a model that other shooters and facilities might choose to adopt. But Maya also understood that her victories at the competition represented only the beginning of a larger challenge. Proving that her methods worked was different from convincing established institutions to embrace change. And Frank Morrison's reaction suggested that Precision Point might resist innovation even in the face of overwhelming evidence of its effectiveness. As Maya drove home through the familiar streets of Cedar Hills, the championship trophy sitting on her passenger seat served as tangible proof of what she had accomplished. 4 records broken, a championship won, and a performance that had redefined what was possible in competitive shooting at Precision Point. But the real test of her achievement would come in the days and weeks ahead, when the shooting community would have to decide whether Maya's success represented a challenge to be resisted or an opportunity to be embraced. The local newspaper coverage of the competition appeared the following morning, with headlines that emphasized the historic nature of Maya's achievement and the unprecedented dominance she had displayed across all categories of competition. The article included quotes from spectators and competitors that ranged from admiration for her skill to questions about whether her methods represented unfair advantages over traditional approaches. Frank Morrison's comments in the newspaper were diplomatically neutral but suggested underlying concerns about the implications of Maya's success for the shooting community at Precision Point. His emphasis on the importance of proper instruction and proven methods seemed to be a defensive response to questions about whether his teaching approaches needed to be updated in light of what Maya had demonstrated. Maya's own quotes in the article focused on her respect for the sport of competitive shooting and her hope that her success might encourage other new shooters to pursue excellence through systematic preparation and analytical approaches. She avoided direct criticism of traditional methods, but emphasized the value of innovation and the importance of remaining open to new ideas that could benefit everyone in the shooting community. The week following the competition brought a steady stream of visitors to Tony's Auto Repair, as curious residents of Cedar Hills stopped by to congratulate Maya on her achievement and ask questions about her approach to competitive shooting. The attention was flattering but also somewhat overwhelming for someone who had never sought public recognition and preferred to focus on the technical aspects of whatever challenge she was pursuing. More significant than the casual attention was the interest expressed by serious shooters from throughout Riverside County who had heard about Maya's record-breaking performance and wanted to learn more about the training methods that had produced such dramatic results. Several asked about the possibility of receiving instruction from Maya, suggesting that her success had created opportunities she had never anticipated. Frank Morrison's response to the growing interest in Maya's methods was predictably defensive. He emphasized the importance of proper fundamental instruction and warned against attempting advanced techniques without adequate preparation. His comments seemed designed to discourage shooters from seeking alternative instruction while maintaining his position as the primary authority on marksmanship training in Cedar Hills. The tension between innovation and tradition that Maya's Success had highlighted was reflected in discussions throughout the Cedar Hills shooting community. Some members embraced the possibility that new methods might help them improve their own performance, while others viewed Maya's achievements as a threat to the established order that had governed competitive shooting at precision point for decades. Maya found herself caught between these competing perspectives, wanting to share the knowledge and techniques that had enabled her success, while also respecting the legitimate concerns of those who worry about the stability and continuity of the shooting community. Her analytical mind appreciated the complexity of the situation and the valid arguments on multiple sides of the debate. The question of whether Maya would be welcome to return to Precision Point as a regular member remained unresolved, despite her spectacular success at the competition. Frank Morrison had not explicitly renewed his ban, but his comments suggested that he remained uncomfortable with her presence and skeptical about the value of the method she represented. Maya realized that winning the competition had been the easy part of her challenge. The more difficult task would be finding a way to use her success constructively, contributing to the improvement of competitive shooting at Precision Point while respecting the traditions and relationships that had sustained the community for nearly 4 decades. The records she had broken were permanent achievements, but the changes those achievements might inspire would require patience, diplomacy, and a willingness to work within existing structures, rather than simply overwhelming them with superior performance. 2 weeks after the competition, Maya received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Patricia Hendricks, Director of Athletics at California State University Riverside, who had read about Maya's record-breaking performance in the regional shooting sports newsletter. Dr. Hendricks explained that the university was launching a new competitive shooting program and was looking for someone with both exceptional marksmanship skills and the analytical background necessary to develop training protocols for collegiate athletes. The position offered a salary that was nearly double what Maya earned at Tony's Auto Repair, along with access to state-of-the-art training facilities and the opportunity to work with student athletes who were hungry to learn and improve more. Importantly, it represented validation from an institution that valued innovation and excellence over tradition and seniority. Dr. Hendricks had specifically mentioned Maya's engineering background and systematic approach to skill development as qualifications that made her uniquely suited for the role. Maya's first instinct was to decline the offer immediately. Cedar Hills was her home. Tony's Auto Repair was where she had learned valuable skills and built meaningful relationships, and leaving felt like abandoning the community where she had grown up. But as she considered the opportunity more carefully, Maya realized that staying in Cedar Hills might mean limiting her potential impact on the sport she had come to love. The conversation with Dr. Hendricks revealed that Maya's competition performance had attracted attention throughout the collegiate shooting community. Several universities were developing programs based on analytical training methods similar to those Maya had pioneered, and there was growing interest in coaches who could bridge the gap between traditional marksmanship instruction and modern sports science approaches. Frank Morrison's reaction to news of Maya's job offer was complex and revealing. Part of him was clearly relieved at the prospect of her leaving Cedar Hills and removing the challenge her presence represented to his authority at Precision Point, but another part seemed to recognize that losing someone of Maya's caliber reflected poorly on the shooting community he had worked decades to build and maintain. The offer from California State University also sparked conversations throughout Cedar Hills about what Maya's departure would mean for the local shooting community. Several newer members had begun seeking her advice on technique and training methods, creating an informal coaching network that had started to challenge Precision Point's monopoly on marksmanship instruction in the area. Tommy Rodriguez was among those most affected by the possibility of Maya leaving. His shooting had continued to improve dramatically using the techniques she had taught him, and he had begun to dream of competing at levels that had seemed impossible. when he was struggling under Frank Morrison's traditional instruction. Maya's departure would eliminate his most valuable source of guidance and support. Sandra Walsh offered a different perspective on Maya's situation during the conversation at Sarah's coffee shop the week after the university's initial contact. Sandra pointed out that Maya had already proven everything she needed to prove at Precision Point, and that staying in Cedar Hills might actually limit her ability to help other shooters discover their potential. The university position would give Maya access to resources and students that could multiply her impact far beyond what was possible in a small-town shooting community. Maya's decision-making process was complicated by her relationship with Rebecca, who had been her anchor and support system throughout the challenges of the past few months. Rebecca encouraged Maya to pursue the university opportunity, arguing that her sister's talents deserved a platform where they could reach their full potential. But Rebecca also acknowledged that Maya's departure would leave a significant void in her own life and in the Cedar Hills community. The question of whether to accept the university position forced Maya to confront fundamental questions about her goals and values. Was her primary obligation to the community that had shaped her, or to the broader potential impact she might have on competitive shooting? Could she achieve more by staying and gradually changing Precision Point from within, or by leaving and demonstrating what was possible when innovative methods were fully embraced and supported? Maya's discussions with Jessica Martinez at Valley Vista provided valuable perspective on the career decisions she faced. Jessica had competed at the collegiate level before transitioning to regional and national competition, and she understood both the opportunities and challenges that came with coaching at the university level. Her advice emphasized the unique opportunity Maya had to influence the development of competitive shooting as a sport, rather than simply pursuing personal achievement. The technical aspects of the university position appealed strongly to Maya's engineering background and analytical nature. The program would involve developing training protocols based on biomechanical analysis, creating measurement systems for tracking athlete development, and establishing standards for competitive performance that could be replicated at other institutions. It was exactly the kind of systematic approach to skill development that Maya had pioneered in her own training. Frank Morrison made an unexpected attempt to convince Maya to remain in Cedar Hills during a conversation at Precision Point 3 weeks after the competition. His offer to make her an official instructor at the range represented a significant concession from someone who had previously questioned her qualifications and methods. But the offer came with conditions that would have limited Maya's ability to implement the innovative approaches that had produced her success. The conversation with Frank Morrison revealed the depth of his internal conflict about Maya's achievements and their implications for his life's work. He recognized her exceptional abilities and the value she could bring to Precision Point, but he also struggled with the prospect of acknowledging that his traditional methods might be improved or replaced by newer approaches. Maya's response to Frank Morrison's offer was diplomatic but firm. She thanked him for recognizing her contributions to the shooting community, but explained that the university position offered opportunities for impact and growth that weren't available in Cedar Hills. Her decision wasn't a rejection of Precision Point or the local shooting community, but rather a choice to pursue her potential where it could have the greatest effect. The final weeks before Maya's departure from Cedar Hills were filled with mixed emotions and complex conversations about legacy and change. Several younger shooters organized informal training sessions where Maya could share techniques and insights that might help them continue improving after she left. These sessions revealed the hunger for innovation and excellence that existed within the Cedar Hills shooting community, despite the resistance from some established members. Maya's last day at Tony's Auto Repair was emotional for everyone involved. She had spent 4 years at the shop, developing skills that had unknowingly prepared her for the precision and attention to detail required for competitive shooting. Tony himself acknowledged that Maya's analytical approach and problem-solving abilities had made her one of the most valuable employees he had ever had, and her departure represented a significant loss for the business. The farewell gathering organized by Sandra Walsh at Precision Point brought together shooters from throughout Riverside County who had been influenced by Maya's approach and achievements. The event was unofficial and somewhat awkward, given Frank Morrison's conflicted feelings about celebrating someone whose success had challenged his authority, but it provided an opportunity for the shooting community to acknowledge Maya's contributions. Tommy Rodriguez's presentation of a custom target signed by everyone who had attended the farewell gathering represented the kind of recognition that meant more to Maya than any trophy or record. The target included personal messages from shooters whose techniques had improved based on Maya's guidance, along with expressions of gratitude for her willingness to share knowledge and challenge conventional thinking. Maya's departure speech at the farewell gathering focused on the potential she saw within the Cedar Hills shooting community, and her hope that the analytical approaches she had demonstrated would continue to evolve and improve even after she left. She emphasized that her success had been built on principles that anyone could learn and apply, rather than unique talents that couldn't be replicated. Frank Morrison's comments at the farewell gathering were gracious but revealed his ongoing struggle to reconcile Maya's achievements with his beliefs about proper instruction and community building. His acknowledgement of her contributions was genuine but qualified, suggesting that he remained uncertain about the broader implications of her success for the future of competitive shooting at Precision Point. The drive to Riverside on Maya's first day as a university coach provided time for reflection on the journey that had brought her from novice shooter to record-breaking champion to collegiate instructor in less than a year. The transformation had been driven by her refusal to accept that traditional methods were necessarily the best methods, and by her willingness to apply analytical thinking to a sport that had often resisted systematic approaches to improvement. Maya's first meeting with the student athletes who would comprise California State University's competitive shooting team revealed both the opportunities and challenges that lay ahead. These students brought enthusiasm and natural ability to the sport, but they also carried assumptions about training and technique that would need to be carefully examined and potentially modified based on evidence rather than tradition. The university's training facilities exceeded anything Maya had imagined when she first began shooting at Precision Point. Advanced measurement systems could track every aspect of shooting performance from trigger pull consistency to sight alignment stability. Environmental controls allowed for precise regulation of lighting, temperature, and air movement. Most importantly, the institutional culture encouraged experimentation and innovation rather than adherence to established methods. Maya's initial training sessions with the university team focused on the same analytical principles that had driven her own development as a shooter. Students learned to approach marksmanship as a system of interrelated variables that could be measured, analyzed, and optimized through systematic practice. The approach was foreign to many students who had learned shooting through traditional instruction, but the results spoke for themselves. Within 6 weeks of beginning training under Maya's guidance, 3 members of the university team had achieved personal best performances that exceeded anything they had accomplished during years of previous instruction. Their improvement validated the methods Maya had developed and provided evidence that her approach could be successfully transferred to other shooters with different backgrounds and experience levels. The success of Maya's coaching at the university level attracted attention from competitive shooting organizations throughout California and beyond. Her systematic approach to skill development and her emphasis on evidence-based training methods represented a new paradigm that challenged traditional assumptions about how marksmanship should be taught and learned. Maya's first season as head coach culminated in the university team's qualification for the National Collegiate Shooting Championships, an achievement that had seemed impossible when the program was launched. More significantly, several of her students had developed into competitors who could challenge records and win major competitions using the analytical techniques Maya had taught them. The recognition Maya received for her coaching success included invitations to speak at shooting sports conferences and opportunities to consult with other universities interested in developing competitive programs. Her influence began to extend far beyond the individual athletes she coached, directly affecting the broader evolution of competitive shooting as a sport. News of Maya's coaching success reached Cedar Hills through the regional shooting sports publications that covered collegiate competition. The articles about her team's achievements were read with pride by some members of the precision point community and with continued skepticism by others who remained committed to traditional approaches. Frank Morrison's response to reports of Maya's university success was characteristically complex. Part of him took pride in the fact that someone who had learned to shoot at his facility was achieving recognition at the national level. But another part continued to struggle with the implication that his methods had been insufficient to develop Maya's full potential. Tommy Rodriguez had continued to improve his shooting using the techniques Maya had taught him, and by the end of his first year after her departure he had become one of the most accurate shooters at precision point. His success using Maya's methods created ongoing tension within the range community and renewed questions about whether traditional instruction was optimal for developing marksmanship skills. Sandra Walsh served as an unofficial ambassador between Maya's new life at the university and the shooting community she had left behind in Cedar Hills. Her regular updates on Maya's coaching achievements and her continued advocacy for analytical training methods helped maintain interest in innovation and improvement at precision point. The second year of Maya's university coaching career brought even greater success, with her team winning the National Collegiate Championship and several of her students earning recognition as the top competitive shooters in their respective categories. The achievement validated everything Maya had believed about the potential for systematic approaches to produce exceptional results in competitive shooting. Maya's success as a coach also created opportunities for her to influence the development of competitive shooting beyond the university level. She was invited to serve on committees that established training standards for national teams and to consult with equipment manufacturers interested in developing products that supported analytical approaches to marksmanship. The impact of Maya's coaching extended beyond competitive results to include research publications that documented the effectiveness of her training methods. University researchers had studied her team's performance improvements and documented the measurable benefits of analytical approaches compared to traditional instruction. The research provided scientific validation for methods that had initially been dismissed as unproven or potentially dangerous. Maya's third year at the university brought an unexpected opportunity to return to her roots in a new capacity. The International Shooting Sports Federation invited her to serve as head coach for the United States national team, a position that would allow her to work with the world's most elite competitive shooters and compete directly against the best coaches and athletes from other countries. The national team position represented the pinnacle of coaching achievement in competitive shooting, but it also meant leaving the university program she had built and the students who had become like family to her. The decision was difficult, but Maya realized that the opportunity to influence competitive shooting at the international level aligned with her original goal of proving that innovative methods could produce superior results. Maya's acceptance of the national team coaching position was announced at a press conference that attracted media attention from throughout the shooting sports community. Her appointment represented recognition that analytical approaches to training had become not just accepted but preferred at the highest levels of competitive shooting. The announcement of Maya's new role reached Cedar Hills through national sports media coverage that brought unexpected attention to the small town where her journey had begun. Local newspapers ran feature stories about Maya's rise from auto mechanic to national team coach, emphasizing the remarkable transformation that had occurred in less than 4 years. Frank Morrison's reaction to news of Maya's appointment as national team coach was his most gracious acknowledgement yet of her achievements and their significance for competitive shooting. His statement to the local newspaper praised Maya's dedication and success while acknowledging that her methods had proven their effectiveness at the highest levels of the sport. Maya's return to Cedar Hills for a brief visit before beginning her national team duties provided an opportunity to reconnect with the community where her shooting career had begun. The reception at Precision Point was warm and celebratory, with even former skeptics acknowledging the remarkable journey that had taken her from band member to national coach. The conversation between Maya and Frank Morrison during her farewell visit was private but seemed to resolve much of the tension that had characterized their relationship. Morrison's acknowledgement of Maya's contributions and his expression of pride in her achievements suggested that time and success had provided perspective on the conflicts that had once seemed irreconcilable. Tommy Rodriguez had continued to develop as a shooter and had begun coaching other new members at Precision Point using modified versions of the techniques Maya had taught him. His success in both shooting and instruction represented the continuing influence of Maya's analytical approach within the Cedar Hills shooting community. Maya's final evening in Cedar Hills was spent at Sarah's coffee shop, the same place where she had lived when her shooting journey began. The conversation with Rebecca about their shared memories and Maya's uncertain future reflected on how dramatically both their lives had changed since that first visit to Precision Point. The drive away from Cedar Hills the next morning marked the end of one chapter in Maya's life and the beginning of another that would test her abilities against the world's best shooters and coaches. The analytical methods she had developed in response to Frank Morrison's dismissal would now be applied to athletes who represented the pinnacle of human performance in competitive shooting. Maya's first training camp with the national team brought together athletes whose achievements made her own record-breaking performance at Precision Point seem modest by comparison. But her systematic approach to identifying and addressing individual weaknesses proved as effective with elite athletes as it had with university students and amateur shooters. The international competitions where Maya coached the national team provided validation that her methods could produce superior results even against coaches and athletes from countries with decades more experience in analytical training approaches. The team's performance improvements under her guidance were documented and studied by competitive shooting organizations worldwide. Maya's success as national team coach culminated in her athletes' domination of the World Championships, where they won more medals than any previous American team and set multiple world records using techniques derived from the analytical approach Maya had pioneered. The achievement represented complete vindication of everything she had believed about the potential for systematic methods to revolutionize competitive shooting. The recognition Maya received for her coaching achievements included awards from international shooting organizations and invitations to establish training programs in other countries interested in adopting American methods. Her influence had grown from challenging a small-town shooting range to reshaping competitive shooting at the global level. Maya's story had become legend within the shooting sports community, frequently cited as an example of how individual determination and innovative thinking could overcome institutional resistance and traditional limitations. Her journey from band-range member to world-renowned coach inspired countless other shooters to question conventional wisdom and pursue excellence through analytical approaches. The techniques Maya had developed were being taught at shooting ranges and training facilities throughout the world, with her systematic approach to skill development becoming the new standard for competitive instruction. The methods that Frank Morrison had once dismissed as unproven had become the foundation for a revolution in how marksmanship was taught and learned. Years later, when shooting sports historians wrote about the transformation of competitive marksmanship in the early 21st century, Maya Chen's confrontation with Frank Morrison at Precision Point would be identified as the catalyst that sparked a fundamental change in how the sport approached training and development. Her refusal to accept that traditional methods were necessarily optimal had created opportunities for improvement that benefited every serious shooter who came after her. The records Maya had broken at that small-town competition still stood on the wall at Precision Point, serving as permanent reminders of what was possible when analytical thinking was applied to competitive shooting. But her greater legacy was the countless shooters whose performance had improved because they had learned to approach their sport with the same systematic dedication to excellence that had driven Maya's own remarkable transformation. Frank Morrison, now in his 70s, had eventually embraced many of the methods Maya had introduced, acknowledging that his initial resistance had been based more on pride than principle. Precision Point had become known throughout Riverside County as a facility that combined respect for tradition with openness to innovation, creating an environment where shooters of all backgrounds could develop their potential. Tommy Rodriguez had become head instructor at Precision Point, bringing Maya's analytical approach to a new generation of shooters while maintaining the community atmosphere that had always characterized the facility. His success represented the continuing evolution of competitive shooting in Cedar Hills and the lasting impact of Maya's brief but transformative presence in the local shooting community. The small-town shooting range where Maya's journey had begun continued to produce exceptional shooters whose achievements reflected the methods she had pioneered and the culture of excellence she had established. Her story had become part of Precision Point's institutional memory, inspiring new members to pursue their own potential with the same determination and systematic approach that had transformed an auto mechanic into one of the world's most successful shooting coaches. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.